Thank you so very much for your invitation and the honor to be here for my wife and for me. I have to say that I did not expect to be depicted in such a manner. And he who thinks that I look like that fellow sitting with President Reagan will be sent to Siberia for 20 years. I have some pride. This movie, which I heartily recommend you get, is a wonderful movie, except for the fact that Ronald Reagan is depicted as a crétin, and I am depicted as fat and ugly. Your introduction, Professor FORCADE, Mr. VERNET, Mr. NOUZILLE, was the perfect stepping-off point for my remarks today. Together you constitute a very concise history of this case. I want to say, first of all, that it's necessary to pay tribute to a person who really made this possible and made my appearance here possible, and that is from a little lady of Denver, Colorado, my home city, who sits in the front row with my wife, Pat, and her name is Catherine Covin-Higgins. She lived this experience with Thomson as the chief interpreter for the chairman of Thomson and visited Moscow. She discovered the book of Sergei Kostin and Eric Raymond, who is with us today. Somewhere, Eric, you're here. And this book, translated into English through the sheer persistence of this lady, is a magnificent accomplishment in reawakening the attention of not only France, but United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere in the world to this critically important case, which is an event in itself within the Cold War. Ladies and gentlemen, I was born in 1936, 5 years old at the beginning of World War II. I can recall precisely where I was as a boy of 5, and precisely the question that I asked my father, what is war? When Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor and destroyed so much of our Pacific fleet. I remember where I was in a boys' camp in the summer of 1945. As I walked into the dining hall of this camp in the pines of my home state of New Jersey, which was so rudely attacked by the Hurricane Sandy, and which so rudely attacked the island where we maintain our vacation home for not only my wife and myself, but for our 7 children and 22 grandchildren. But I looked under the arm of one of the directors of the camp, walking to the dining hall, and he had a newspaper from Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Daily News, and he was carrying it like that. I turned my head sideways, and I read the headline, "A bomb may win war." What is an A-bomb? 6 days later, I found out when I was home, standing in my front yard, and suddenly sirens blared. Horns of the cars were beeping. People were cheering. The war was over. The second bomb had been dropped on Nagasaki. Here we had Hiroshima and Nagasaki bringing to a close World War II. We believed that the world would now reorganize and reorganize for peace. After all, we created a Bretton Woods. We created a United Nations. The great powers would come together, would never again permit the kind of violence that had been perpetrated upon Europe by the savage forces of Adolf Hitler, and in the first instance well known to France and to Poland and to the rest of Europe. We were convinced that this could not happen, and then it did. The story of how this all unfolded has a beginning and it has an end, so to speak, or perhaps it has not yet ended. The wartime conferences of the Allied leaders were extremely important because we were trying to understand one another. From our point of view, it was President Franklin Roosevelt, Stalin, Churchill. These were the main leaders, and they had conferences of many types during World War II. All, we thought, with the purpose of bringing to a conclusion the atrocities that were taking place in Europe, and of course later specifically against the United States and then Great Britain in the Pacific theater as the Japanese attacked us as well. But the conferences that took place, in particularly those pertaining to Europe, such as in Cairo, in Moscow, Tehran, Potsdam, Yalta, and then Potsdam, were determined to shape the future of Europe. The beliefs and the lead of the leaders and the wishes of the people were expressed in the communiques of those conferences. In Europe, especially in France, there was a strong affection for the Allied cause. After all, in Normandy, the cemeteries are littered not only with the bodies of the French, but of the brave British and American soldiers who invaded on the 6th of April 1944, the D-Day.